Long post. If you recognize me based off this, then hello. I needed to air this out before it ate me up inside. Please keep all identities private. Very important to read the TLDR for context. TLDR, a nice guy / hopeless romantic, friend with romantic feelings demanded daily texts, first initiatives, and equal time in our friendship. IF. Made it clear I'm not emotionally available in any form. He consistently messaged me and showed up uninvited, once after I blocked him, twice to my doorstep. After I missed a coffee hangout, which he secretly called a date, he unfriended me and sent negative texts about how I used his vulnerability against him, claiming he's come to peace with it and that it's up to me now. When we were supposed to walk alone together, his idea, to restart with new expectations and boundaries, I got uncomfortable with his obsessive behavior and blocked him, prioritizing my safety and mental health. AITAH for not giving him a chance, even though he was overall a good person who just cared too much. Is equal reciprocation earned, or assumed when a party is very invested? I'll start by saying I don't regret prioritizing myself, however I do hold much guilt for hurting him. There have been times where I have opened his texts and choose not to respond. The inability to muster motivation to speak to people is not uncommon within me, and a struggle that I feel comes from my very introverted lack of social battery. I feel like social media had affected that part of me, and why I distance myself from people trying to get too close. His advances were emotional, and what I believe is based off trauma bonding or assumptions. I think I should have recognized it sooner. There are a few things I wish hadn't happened that I'd attribute the issue to. The night he drove / carried me back into my apartment when I was blacked out from a party, he confessed to someone that he saw me in a different light that night in relation to romance. Maybe a sympathy crush, feeling sympathetic towards me due to his previous trauma, or perhaps heroic chivalry in saving a damsel in distress. A different night where he asked me to go look at stars and I agreed, naively believing it to be truly platonic. He initiated very sensitive discussions about personal trauma, of which I listened, and engaged with some of my own experiences, times of personal and deep questions that I wasn't comfortable answering, but did anyways in order to force the genuine closeness he sought between us, all within short spans of knowing each other. Another time, he believed I was talking to someone and lied to him about emotionally availability, and left the party with a fit of jealousy that people could feel. Why did he feel entitled to baseless assumptions about me? Because he heard me talk about an ex? Would that topic matter in a platonic friendship? He said he created a safe space for me to be myself, and that I had chosen to not use it. For a while, patience was his virtue. I did believe his intentions to be true and without return, but that small pocket of safety had justified expectations in his light. He unintentionally generalized my entire being into a section of his life by saying he saw a hurt younger version of himself in me. Did it stem from our short exchanges of trauma? Could I have prevented this ideology? Despite these red flags, I know I purposefully ignored my instincts and carried on this friendship. I mentioned already a couple times that I'm not looking for a partner when it was brought up. He let my words be buried underneath the preaching of his voice to let nature take its course. I wanted to avoid repeated confrontation and future awkwardness in mutual friend circles, so I let it go. We would often see each other on campus or at gatherings. Maybe in a way, it was my fault I didn't stop it sooner. Maybe all the hurt I caused him wouldn't have happened. All the hurt he caused me. I know I didn't feed into his persistence, but I didn't stop it until it became obsessive. There was a time he left letters in a bag on my front doorstep at 3 a.m. 3 a.m., standing at my front door. Within them, he told me about his pestering desires to get closer and foster a relationship with me. His self-proclaimed hopeless romantic self wished that I could care as much as he did. He wanted to know my favorite color, my pet peeves, things I kept deepest within my being. It was at this point I realized I needed to put my boundaries and feelings into a real thing to hold and read. So of course, I wrote him back one letter. One letter to make sure I was clear, my vulnerability and all. Pretty much it summed to this: I appreciate you being honest about your feelings, but I want to be clear that I'm not emotionally available and won't be in the future. Insert brief mention from past trauma. I value the time you've put into our friendship, but no matter how hard I try, I know I can't promise that I'll meet your expectations as a friend. I need patience to let my walls down. When I say his standards were high, they were high. He required unrequited and equal reciprocation because it was an ultimatum put upon me. In other words, I'm either everything or nothing to him. If I was everything to him, then what do you think he wanted? I had hoped he understood clearly, but he didn't. Time and time again, he would message my number or other my social medias until I replied to either. During midterms too, mind you. There's a lot of things that contribute to a busy schedule for me, and when I wind down for relaxation, I don't include mandatory responses as part of that. Me time should be how I see fit to use it. He said if I had time to have Discord open and have my status as listening to music, I had time to respond to him. There were times he lectured me on what makes a good friend. Passive-aggressively mentioned how I never give him the time of day, although we went to eat just last week. There came a time after he quietly unfriended me and stopped messaging me for about a week that he asked to talk over coffee. Not a date, right? I joked. Not a date, he grimaced back, with a frown you could feel over text. Little did I know behind my back he considered it one to others. I give my world to this girl, and she doesn't even want to respond to a text, amongst things he would tell his friends. This is where I do believe I am to blame heavily, having missed this unknowingly important meeting. I apologized profusely, and we rearranged for another day. The day had came, and just an hour before the selected time, he messaged me that he returned my letter I had given him on my car window. What are you saying, no coffee? I asked over a confused message. I've come to peace with it. We can continue if you have questions, he replied. Cowardice, I thought to myself in a fit of disbelief and frustration. An act of selfishness and contempt for rejection. An action to feel what I had done rather than the words I said to listen. I still don't understand why it took me missing coffee for him to understand. Why did that speak louder than my words? I wrote to him this final time how unfairly he set upon these expectations for me to return affection and care. That yes, of course his confession of love would affect our platonic friendship in its initial building stage. Why else? 3 loud knocks. He came to my front door again, as I was typing. Uninvited, unapologetic. Apparently, he was in the neighborhood and found it convenient to leave the letter rather than just give it to me at coffee in an hour. What followed was me sitting down on my porch and him pacing around and venting about how my communication skills lacked, how he wished he felt valued by me, how selfish I am to forget that he is also a human with feelings. Maybe in some sick way, yes, his feelings mattered more than mine. Was it because he had more? His investment in me obviously was more than what I could give back. If I wasn't interrupted and spoken over, he'd known that my communication skills weren't non-existent. I did set time aside for a friendship. I let him join me to eat dinner and paid for his food on short notice. The time he asked to buy me dinner, he didn't even check if the restaurant was open. I did ask about his day and when he would be free to share calls or hang out. I was there the times he asked for emotional confidentiality because he wanted to confide in me about his family. I listened to his feelings and validated them. I did show my respect and care, just in ways he found worthless because it would have never been enough. But yeah, maybe I shouldn't have blocked him. The next week we tried to reconnect on a nature walk. Maybe the sick, awful feeling in my stomach were just nerves and not a worry of what desperation does in a man's heart for a woman when they're alone. Maybe. He called the night prior not to instigate and further berate me for bringing up how his feelings had affected our friendship, but rather to make me understand his side and remind me he has found his peace. I'm glad he found his peace. Perhaps after I sent my final "I'm done" text, that was my own selfish peace. Because when I blocked him, he came to my front door again. Knocked another 3 times harder than the last. But I didn't open the door this time. Ada? And thank you for reading. I'd love to hear your responses to my questions I had at the end of my TLDR summary. There's no black or white, only individualistic truths that we can't call the objective truth without certainty. My truth will never be Mark's truth, nor will his be mine. Ada for not giving him a chance, even though he was overall a good person who just cared too much? Is equal reciprocation earned or assumed when a party is very invested?